Hello, and welcome to another edition of Truth and Rhythm, brought to you by funkinstuff.net. This is the interview show that gets deep into the pocket with contemporary music's foremost masters of the groove. Available in video format at funkinstuff.net and on YouTube, Truth and Rhythm can now also be enjoyed on the go in its audio podcast edition from funkinstuff.net, iTunes, and most leading providers. I'm your host, Scott Dr. G.X. Goldfine, musicologist and author of Everything is on the One, the first guide to funk. Better get your copy if you don't have it yet. Whether you're watching or listening, as always, I thank you very much for your support. And you've tuned in for another great episode because my guest is singer, guitarist, composer Garrett Shider, a member of George Clinton's P-Funk All-Stars and Parliament-Funkadelic. Garrett is the son of the late, great Parliament-Funkadelic frontman Garrett Shider, also known as Doo-Wop, also known as Star Child, also known as Diaper Man for his famous stage attire. Gary, in many ways, and here's his a photo of him right here from his
That's him.
Earth Tour days of the 1970s with the bop gun and his diaper. But in many ways, Gary was the heart of the funk mob. He lent his fantastically soulful vocals and underrated guitar playing to dozens of P-Funk classics and hundreds of concerts, maybe even thousands of concerts. After he tragically passed away at age 56 in 2010, Garrett stepped into his role with the band and is continuing to perpetuate his dad's as well as P-Funk's legacies. Garrett has been touring with Clinton and Company and also contributing in the studio, including Funkadelic's Shake the Gate from a couple of years ago, and the long-anticipated Medicaid Fraud Dog by Parliament. Garrett recently released his own full-length album, Hand Me Down Diapers. Again, some glare, there it is.
Yeah.
And that title and associated title track is a tribute to his dad. Garrett has also adopted the Star Child Jr. moniker as further reverence to his P-Funk royalty lineage. Hand Me Down Diapers is an immensely enjoyable record that has been reviewed at funkinstuff.net. You can see it there, but here's a little excerpt from that. Quote, "This 8-song collection embodies the Funkadelic ethos and sound, critically favoring authenticity and sonic quirkiness over mimicry and cliches. Shider's vocal and musical nuances and lyrical musings add up to a fresh spin on the P-Funk template," end quote. All that, and I hear he may be already working on a follow-up. So with
That's
that,
right.
we turn to Garrett. How are you?
What's up, guys?
What's going on, man?
All right, all right. Welcome to the Funky Diapers Studios.
Yeah, it looks like the place to be. All the awards, got some recording equipment there.
Well, I guess it in here all day, baby. This is where the Hand Me Down Diapers was created.
Is that in DC or where are we looking at?
Yeah, this is in well, actually Maryland, right outside of Washington, D.C. Yeah, I'm in PG County, just out here getting it in, man. This is what I do when I'm off, man. I'm in my lab and I'm just, putting in some work, trying to keep the legacy going.
Well, you're about 6 hours northeast. I can feel the funk from there.
Okay, good. I'm doing the right thing then.
I'm a lifelong fan of your dad's, and I'm a new fan of yours, so it's so great to have you here today.
I appreciate you having me, man. I appreciate it, man. And from him, thank you a lot. He loved you guys, man.
I met him a couple times backstage in probably the late 80s to early 90s time frame.
Mm-hmm.
He was always just so like relaxed and just nice, and he just seemed like a really easygoing, no airs about him, down to earth guy,
Very much.
Yeah.
Very much. An important lesson that I got from him, man. He was always a humble guy, man. Always humble. And I say he loved everybody. He loved everybody. I get a lot of stories like that about him all the time when I'm traveling. And, all I can say is, man, is like, I can dig it. He loved all you guys. He truly loved you guys, man. So, he got off on it. I could see it when he performed. He gave a lot. He gave a lot to to specifically to the audience, man, as far as when it came to like interacting and I could tell he just he loved it, man, and he talked about it a lot, man. He got off on it, so
He had to, for doing so many shows for so many years, and
yeah,
we
40 years of his life, man.
certainly had an impact on me. I mean, I'm wearing this hat today as tribute to not only P-Funk but him, because he used to wear this hat around that same time frame that I met him.
Okay.
And we were talking before we went on the air, but behind me here are the Mothership Connection and Tear the Roof Off the Sucker record awards, and those are actually authentic ones from the 1970s.
Okay.
And Star Child, I didn't tell you this, Garrett, but Star Child was actually, well, first of all, that was the first album I ever got with my own money when I was a kid.
Okay.
Yeah, and then Star Child was my first favorite song on there. And so much so that back then CBs were really popular.
Okay.
CB radios, and so I had the handle of Star Child.
Okay, cool.
So this is from one Star Child to another right now.
Hey man, Star Child's influence, man, it reigns deep, man, and stretches, across a lot of, stretches across oceans, man, and boundaries, man. His, in the 6 years I've been traveling in this band and doing the thing, man, we've gone to a lot of different places, a lot of places I never even thought I'd ever see in my life. And one thing that I'm learning is that, the funk is everywhere, dude. You know what I mean? The influence of this thing, man, it's really, it's stretched so far, man, so far. So that's another thing that I'm kind of proud of, kind of another reason why I'm proud to, to be able to have this, to even, carry on the way I'm doing it, man. My father had me around this from the time I was a baby, from the time I was out my mother's stomach, so this is pretty much, I guess, it has always been my destiny, even when I was being a stubborn teenager and trying to deny it and, doing the rap thing instead. I always knew that this is what I was bred to do. And I always knew that I could do this, so.
It's like Luke Skywalker, your destiny.
Yeah, what I mean? Yeah. And I welcome it, man. I welcome it. I love doing it, man. I love to be able to do it.
We're going to talk about that a little bit more before we get into some of the music, but I wanted to talk a little more, Garrett, about, what the childhood was like. What was it like being a Shider? How was music, filtering throughout the household, and what was it like, and when did you first get into music yourself?
So my first memories of life, are backstage at P-Funk shows, grown-ups walking around in shiny costumes and, a bunch of eccentric personalities. I got it at a very, very young age. I got that something special was going on, something very fun, something very cool. And what I also knew was that my dad was, especially at that time, was pretty much the forefront of it. It was really cool to be able to watch him go out and take control of, 50, 60, 70,000 people, and make everybody's, you see 60, 70,000 hands doing like this, or he says, say, yeah, you hear the entire arena full of people go, yeah, what I mean? The energy was just amazing. I can remember him bringing me out on stage, what I mean, at like 3 years old. And, just the entire environment of it, always knew it was something special. But now home was not that, home was a more serious thing. And I especially also remember at home as a kid, as far as I knew, the catalog of P-Funk stretched for as far as any show that I could remember seeing as a kid. You see what I'm saying? And those songs, whichever songs I heard in the show, as far as I was concerned, were spread out amongst maybe 3 or 4 Parliament and Funkadelic combined albums that we actually had in our house. You know what I'm saying? I think we had Cosmic Slop. I remember us having. I think we had either Mothership Connection or the Clones of Dr. Funkenstein. We had, and maybe like One Nation Under a Groove. We had, those might have been the only 3 records of Parliament-Funkadelics that I remember us having in our house. And I had a little toy record player, and I actually used to listen to those records to death. You know what I mean? But as far as I was concerned as a little kid, that was as far as the catalog stretched. My father, all we heard in our house, whatever it was they were working on, you know. So I come up around the time where P-Funk was Parliament-Funkadelic was getting ready to be on their last days, and we're going into now the side acts, the Family series, and the George Clinton records, and you know, all of this, that, and the third, the Tracy records, and you know, so these are my memories at home. Songs like Michelle, you know, The Sessions, you know, that's what my father listened to at home. He listened to his work. He listened to his work. So whatever they were working on in the studio, he brought it home and he played it to death. He played it over and over and over and over and over. When you got in the car with him, he had a cassette of it and he played it over and over and over and over. And plus, at the time, he was working on my mother's band, Legs, and they used to rehearse at our house, in our garage. So forgive me, man. This is written nostalgia, man. But so they used to record and they used to rehearse in our garage like 3 times a week, and he was knee deep into that, producing my mother's stuff, and him and my mother writing songs together, and my mother performing locally, my dad's studios at home, man. Just, you know, musicians all the time, music all the time. And it was nothing that they had already previously recorded, man. It was always about the next thing with him. Always about the next thing. I was a teenager by the time I really got into the catalog. And that's when I really realized how incredible he was.
You must, Gary, you must have heard a lot of the songs on the radio, though. And did it strike you then?
You know, of course, you hear the radio songs, you know, but I'm talking about the catalog. You know, we're talking about 10 years worth of Funkadelic records, 10 years worth of Parliament records. You know, we're talking about, not even talking about the Brides, the Bootsies, the Eddies, the Bernies, you know, all of this stuff. Some of it I didn't even have no clue what it was, you know, but it was always about the next thing with him. I'm sorry, man. Yeah, always about the next thing with him. And so, yeah, it wasn't until I was a teenager that I really got into the catalog, because he didn't play that stuff. You know, he was a humble guy. He wasn't a, look what I did. He wasn't that kind of cat, you know. So when the Westbound stuff got re-released on CD in the early 90s, I was about 15 years old, and a shipment of all of those CDs came to our house, all of them. And this was my real awakening. I got every record that was under Westbound on CD, as well as that Music for My Mother CD, the purple one. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, Music for My Mother.
Yeah, I got that CD with along with all the Westbound records. I went through the Funkadelic, the Music for My Mother one, and I read and I read, and I sat up all night just listening to these CDs and just reading, just reading and learning, you know, all the stuff that he didn't talk about, because he was a humble guy, man. He didn't do that. So I was just learning and listening and listening. And that's when I realized that he was really incredible, because I heard things from him specifically that I didn't see him do in show. I didn't really get a chance to see him do in studio anymore, because they weren't even really doing that kind of music anymore. And I just discovered something. And even when I discovered that and I pulled him aside, you know, I'm as big a fan as you guys are of him as well. So when I discovered this stuff and I pulled him aside and I made a big deal about it, just so cool as a fan, man. Just cool as a fan. Just how, man. Humility, man. That's the biggest lesson that I got in my household from this, man. That's the biggest lesson that I learned from this, amongst all the other lessons that were there to be learned, and I learned a lot of them. That was the most important one. That's why you guys love him so much, man. That's why y'all will never forget him. That's why I never forget him, you know, because it's easy to get that far in your career when you're doing this, and then lose sight of the fact that you once were just like all these fans who adore you. It's very easy to lose sight of that. And a band this big, you can believe that a lot of people in this band did lose sight of that, you know. But him as the heart and soul of it, to remain humble through all of that, man, through all of the accolades, through all of the praises, to be able to shrug all that off and still be you, you know, I give him all the kudos in the world for that. It's something I'm even still struggling with myself. It all just kind of lets me know, it all just, especially getting a chance to walk in his footsteps now a little bit as well. All this lets me know that, there's nothing, first off, nothing like the original G. You know what I'm saying? What my pops did will never be done again. I get that. You know what I'm saying? So I won't even chase that. I won't even chase that. My only mission is to make sure that people never forget the P, and especially his contributions to the P. Because as you said in your review of that record, man, he's a very underrated musician. Very underrated. Very underrated, very unsung, man. And if I can make sure that his name at least has some prominence like it's supposed to when people are talking about these musicians and some of these great artists of this time. When I discovered those Westbound records, I realized that my dad could have been up there with Marvin Gaye's and Al Green's and Stevie Wonders of that ilk. He could have been there. He should have been there, but his humility made him made him decide that it was better to be a team player as opposed to to roll for self like that. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So, a lot of lessons to be learned, man. A lot of lessons to be learned. And I was a typical kid about it, man, growing up, a teenager who's stubborn, don't really want to, that's your thing, yeah, so what, you travel the world, you think you know everything, I was that typical kid, but while I was doing all of that, secretly, I took in all the lessons, man. I took in all the lessons. I understood that I was blessed. I understand what I'm blessed with. I understand that. So that's my only mission, man, is to make sure that the Shider name is never forgotten, and that the P is never forgotten. And George and his kids and grandkids who are also following in the footsteps. We're all going to be here to make sure that it's never forgotten. You know what I'm saying? But it's something that I decided when my dad left here. It's something I decided that I was going to make a passion of mine. It's actually, as unfortunate as it was, him leaving here gave me new life, because at that time I was kind of in a weird spot and not even really doing music anymore. Wasn't even, I was kind of over it at that time, and him leaving here and some of the things that he said to me right before he left here, just, it kind of rebirthed me, man. And I decided to make this my passion, just like he did. I realized that he was passionate about this. He loved it. He loved it. You know, you don't get that good unless you love it. So, you know.
How did that, first off, I want to say, I always envy people that tell me that they're getting into certain P-Funk albums for the first time, or they haven't heard something and they get to hear it, because I remember what it was like when I first heard all of those, and it was just so overwhelming and amazing in most cases, so I'm sure, especially with the, relationship and him being your dad, that must have just been so powerful.
Man, he was Superman. He was Superman to me. It was like living with Superman, dude. Living with Superman, except he actually, reprimanded you and scolded you and might whoop your butt if you got out of line. Was the only difference. So as long as you stayed in line, he was awesome, man. He was just awesome. So yeah, I remember it clear as day, man. I'm telling you, I stayed up. I discovered those CDs, and I probably started listening around dinner time, and I didn't, it was probably time for me to go to school the next morning by the time I was, still into it, and like, wow, I got to go to school now, but this shit is fucking crazy and amazing, man. I had to basically tell him, I had no idea you were so great, man. I had no idea, and I've seen you do your thing, but watching them do their thing live and actually listening to the music, some of the music in their catalog, man, sometimes you almost think that you watching that what you listen to on record, certain songs, you almost think that what you're looking at on stage, there's no way that they, yeah. Yeah, so it was an enlightening experience for me, man, to be able to get those records. What it did was it made me want, at that point, it made me want to hear everything. It made me want to get everything. You know what I'm saying? I would go to the record stores and, whatever CDs or P-Funk, Parliament-Funkadelic CDs or cassettes that I didn't already have at home, I would buy it just so I could go, listen to it back and forth and analyze it. And, just because of that, I know a lot of these P-Funk records like the back of my hand, just unconsciously. So even the songs that I didn't listen to that much, when they come on, I could probably hum the whole melody and sing the hook or, yeah.
Well, yeah, that entire, I think you can see back there, those CD cases. Yeah. Most of that is all P-Funk related on CD. And then I had, of course, all the vinyl before that when they first came out, and that's in another room. So, yeah. Okay. So, Garrett, when you started to look to follow in your dad's footsteps and perform with Clennon, what was that transition like, and how did that happen?
Well, it was really an interesting time for me. At the time, I was maybe 4 or 5 years into working at FedEx, and but I was actually had been just moved back home and was living with him, and his studio was right outside of my door. And I didn't have like a bolt on my door or any that worked or anything. So, and he was good for just kind of just pushing the door open. It's like, yeah, so just hold on, I almost lost what I'm getting at with that. The memories are just, killing me right now. Okay. So yeah, his studio was right outside my door. But I was working at FedEx at the time. It was about 4 or 5 years into it. And I used to put in 12-hour days at FedEx. I would get up and go, I would be at FedEx at like 6, 7 in the morning. And I wouldn't leave out the building, and I wouldn't come back and then leave out the building until about 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And I would get home and I'd be all dressed in FedEx and come in the house and go down the stairs in my room, and he would be right out there, on the other side of he had a living room, and his studio was in the corner, and my room was right here in the living room, next to the living room. So he would be, I come down the steps and he would be in the studio just drinking his beers and recording his music and, asking me about my day. But I probably would have had such a rough one that I'd just be kind of grumpy and it'd be like, you know, and it was that, So one day, also at this time, what we had just put the Merc camp thing back together. And instead of doing necessarily a rap group, we had just kind of decided to put a label together. And I was kind of more so just managing and or whatever, more so than I was recording and lending a little hand because I was working too much. And one of those days, I came home from FedEx, and the everybody involved in the label was at the house. We had a meeting, did a session, everyone left, and he was really proud at the time. He was really happy to see us getting back into it. And he was always one of our biggest cheerleaders, and all these meetings were going down in his house. So he would be, hawking all over the place. He would be that guy like, Dad, would you go upstairs for a second? He'd just be so excited, and wanting to, try to, just trying to let us know that he was there with us or whatever. And had this meeting, did a little recording, everybody left. And before I went to bed, he pulled me aside to talk to me or whatever. And basically he was telling me, I guess he was coming up on, I guess, a little bit of cash from, some royalties or whatever the case. And he was telling me, he was like, man, first off, he's telling me, I see what you're doing. And, he was talking about wanting to invest. He was so proud and just going on. And he pulled on my FedEx. I had my FedEx uniform on still. He pulled on my pants and he was like, I see, basically the point was, I see what you're doing and I got to get you up out of this shit. What's this thing? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then in the same discussion is when he decided to also let me know that he was having problems with his health and it was starting to worry him. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe a month after that, same deal. I come in from work and I'm in the studio. I'm in my room, door shut. He's in his studio, and I come out and I just see him, putting his coat on, and it's late as hell. And where you headed? I'm going to the hospital. My hand, I can't move my hand. He says I can't move my hand. What do you mean? I can't move my hand. And you're gonna try to drive yourself to the hospital? No, man. So I took him to the hospital. And, that's when we come to find out that he had cancer. This is when everything started to be disclosed. He had cancer, and not only does he have it, but it's so far gone that, they gave him a year. He lasted 3 months, Now within that, I'm at FedEx and I'm going through that now. I was already getting kind of disgruntled at work, not liking work, dabbling back into my music. And I knew that's what I wanted to do, but I couldn't really do it. So he gets sick, comes out the hospital after about a week, goes on the road for a month, and he almost died out there. But he made it back home, and he lasted about another month before he ultimately passed. So through all of that, I had to I took off from work. I got a chance to really, hear some things from him and, spend my last little bit of time with him or whatever. And one of the last times that I really got to talk with him is one of the times that he really said the things to me that I needed to hear that put me on the mission that I'm on now. I won't disclose those things, but he said some things that were really important and just really heartfelt and really hard for him going through what he was going through. I even admired him watching him fight that, man. I admire him so much. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
So he finally transitioned. I took a month off from FedEx, to deal with everything that came with that. And within while he, and during his memorial service, which was in Plainfield, P Funk just happened to kind of be on tour at the time and going through the area, you know, so it all kind of coincided where the band could be there for his memorial service, and you know, his service was nice and everything, and you know, I had all this time off of work, so you know, I just spent a lot of the month, half of it in Plainfield just with my family, and then the other half just kind of riding the tour with George, just because, you know, especially back then, they just didn't care. You know, I could just get on the bus and they knew what I was going through, and so I did that. I went back to work at FedEx. I worked about 2 weeks, and within that 2 weeks, uh, I ended up getting 2 tickets. At this time, in the Maryland, D.C. area, they had just started installing these speed camera tickets all over the fucking place. And I got 2 of them in the 2 weeks I had somewhere along the line, 2 speed tickets come up, and they decided they wanted to suspend me another month. This was 2 weeks after I had just got back from taking a month off from my dad. They decided to suspend me another month. Um, Little did they know at that point, I was pretty much over it. So what I decided to do was I took the suspension month and I jumped back on tour with George and I rode around with him. And, you know, all this time I'm just really starting to, you know, get my buzz back and, you know, get back into the environment and, you know, all the passion that I used to have for it. And then, you know, maybe 10 times more, I just, you know, started to feel. And it was at that point that I knew I was done at FedEx within that suspension. So when I went back, I worked 2 weeks, long enough to turn in my notice, and I left. Now I didn't immediately go to work with George. I left, and that first year I just attempted on my own to try to make something happen. You know what I'm saying? I just, for whatever reason, you know, I just decided I didn't really want to try to make that George's burden to try to, you know, look what I'm going through. Will you help me? You know, I didn't want to come to him like that. You know, so I chose to take my own steps and, you know, go my own. And the more that I did that, I realized a few things. First off, the first and probably the most important thing that I realized was the fact that I had taken an interest in guitar playing at the age of 16, but it was a difficult thing, and it was something that I was not patient enough to take lessons with. So with that being said, and something that I was also easily discouraged with if I wasn't playing it like my dad was playing it, you know what I mean, in like a matter of like 2 days, I was discouraged with it. And then I probably wouldn't play it again for God knows how long. It was that from the time I was 16 until I went on this venture. And I said to myself, well, you know, when you go on this venture, you know, one of the first things that people are going to ask you, they're going to say, oh, you're Garrett Shider's son? Well, I know you know how to play the guitar, don't you? I knew they were going to ask me that. So I said, you know what? I better start working on this right now. So that was my first thing. I picked the guitar up, and I realized at that point that I had a very, 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 very long road ahead of me as far as that went. So there was that. Then the next thing was I just started to realize at some point that even though the people I was involved with, they meant well, I just realized that they just were not equipped to help me take it where I really needed to take it with what I was carrying. The only way that I could really get to that platform was I needed to be out on the road with George again. So it took about a year after my father passed when they made their way back to DC. I went to a show, and then after the show, I pulled George aside and I asked him, I said, George, I'd like to come back out on the road. You know, and he quickly okayed it, you know, had me come out and do a little crew work, but also, you know, incorporated me into the band. But now when I came back out on the road, he didn't necessarily tell me what it was I would be doing, And I, you know, my singing thing has always been, that's always been something I've done. I went to a performing arts high school for voice. I always sang, you know, even before performing arts high school, I sang, you know what I mean? I always knew I could sing. It was something that I just kind of took for granted because I just always knew how to do it, you know? So, uh, 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 um, when he had me come back out, I just assumed that he was going to have me basically singing background, you know what I'm saying, and mainly just working in his crew and singing background. Well, the first show that I came to, we did the Gathering of the Juggalos, and you know how George is always throughout the history of Parliament-Funkadelic has always restructured his band at some point, meaning some folks were probably left and new folks were probably bought, and then a core of folks who you always know still there, right? You know, you always get these transitions with George. Well, little did I realize that he was bringing me back in the middle of one of these transitions. So now, when I asked him at this show, he was fresh from still carrying 6 guitars. You know what I mean? So the last thing that I thought I was coming out to do with what I just told you about my guitar playing, the last thing that I thought I would be doing was playing guitar in the band. I thought I was going to be singing. I got to the Gathering of the Juggalos, and you started seeing who all was here, who was all was at the gig, and it was like not maybe not even half of what I had just seen when I was at the show in DC, and I asked them to come back out here. You see, start seeing about half the people, and the only guitarist I saw was Michael Hampton. He was the only guitarist walking around, you know. So I see George, and George says, "Oh, you made it," you know. And I said, "George, where, you know, who plays, you know, you didn't bring your guitar. I thought you were gonna play. You did. Oh man, you didn't bring your. Oh God. Oh yeah. So the first Juggalo show we did, Mike Ham's the only one up there playing guitar, because unbeknownst to me, he wanted me also to play guitar. You know. So basically, now enter me into P Funk Guitar Boot Camp next to Michael Hampton. You know, a lot of fun. A lot of fun. You
Yeah,
know,
so well, Hampton's a good one to have taken your wing.
well,
I mean,
yeah, if you can deal with the with you know tough lessons, you know, because it's boot camp. It's boot camp. It's not what they call it. It's not summer camp. This is boot camp. You know, when you get dealing with Michael Hampton, you know, because Michael Hampton has been great pretty much from the day that he picked up a guitar. Right. You know what I mean? Yeah. And what I learned about Michael Hampton and being on tour with him is, you know, being that great, this is how you get that great. You literally do eat, sleep, and shit with the guitar. You literally do that because that's what Mike Hampton does. He obsesses with guitar, dude. Obsesses with it. I've literally seen him sleep on the tour bus with an acoustic guitar hanging off of his neck. You know what I'm saying? I've seen him wake up and play. You know, I've seen him play and fall asleep with it. I've seen his hotel room where his hotel room is just his guitar might be broke down into pieces and he's tweaking and fixing and listening to somebody at the same time on the computer and just into it, man, into it.
Is Blackbird the same way?
You know what? Not like not as visibly as Mike. Not as visibly as Mike. You know what I mean? Like Blackbird's thing. Blackbird can do anything that you can do on a guitar pretty much. Is Blackbird's thing. You know what I'm saying? Blackbird is like a, you know, he's like a master. You know what I mean? He's like a, you know, he's like a, you know, if there was a doctorate given to a guitarist, that's what he is. He's a doctor. You know what I mean? He's Dr. McKnight when it comes to guitar playing, because you can put on anything or you can play anything, and he can pick the guitar up. He can find the chords he can find, not the standard chords that go with what you're playing. You know what I mean? I'm seeing him don't, he's playing chords, man, to some of your shit. And I mean, he's chording all the way up and down the fret. And you seeing him using positions that, these are just not the typical majors and minors and sevenths. And, they just, he's fucking amazing, dude. You can put some reggae on. He's going to get right into the groove and then doctor it. You can put some metal on. He's gonna, turn on his distortion and shred like a doctor. You could put some jazz on and he's gonna get right into the groove. Chords, everything. Blackbird is a doctor, man. He's a master. Whereas Mike Hampton is just someone who just don't ever put the guitar down. You know what I mean? He just never puts it down, and then he's like a sponge for the information. You know what I mean? So it's like whatever I'm doing, if I see you do a thing, then I'm gonna come over here and get with you and check this thing out that you're doing. That's cool what you're doing right there. Let me get with that. And now, you've given me something to work on for the whole month, to something else to obsess over because I'm bored with this, these modes that I've been scaling on forever and a lot, a day. You just giving me something else. So now he's on to this and doing that, or now something's on the radio that's done caught his ear and it's like, oh, I like that. So that's Mike, man. Mike is just he's a savant. You know what I mean? He's a guitar savant, bro. He just, like I said, literally probably showers with the guitar. He's that guy.
Well, I mean, I know both him and Blackbird were playing incredibly when they were teenagers. So.
Oh yeah. They cut from two different cloths, but definitely have that in common. They're both masters, man, for in their own rights, man.
So when did you start feeling comfortable enough holding the guitar on the stage?
Oh man, it took a long time. Because I'm telling you, because when you great like Mike Hampton is, and Mike has the kind of ear that you play that one note in the whole figure just a half step hair wrong, then it fucking makes his head makes his head explode. You know what I mean? And his head is going to explode right there on the stage. You know what I'm saying? So, it believe me, it took a minute. It took a while. Oh, it took a while, man. But, and even still, I still have a long way to go when it comes to these cats, even still to this day, man, I stand up there and I look over and I'm like, man, I can't believe that I'm up here playing next to this cat, man. And, like, oops, I can't believe, I hope he didn't hear me, miss that little note right there. Oh, shit, it's still that. I think it's going to always be that because I've also grown up with these guys. You know what I mean? These guys are, they've known me since I was, since before I could walk. They've been, they've put a hand in the kind of raising me into this, you know what I mean? So it's that too.
So they're kind of like, in a way, like big brothers or.
Yeah, they're the uncles, man. These are my uncles, man. You know what I'm saying? So, and like I said, it's not, and now, the uncle nephew relationship has got to be out the window, you know what I mean? Because now you stepping up here, and, now you're stepping up here into this is what we do, you know what I mean? And you stepping up here into that. And in order to make sure that we can keep doing what we do, you know what I'm saying? You got to make sure you pull your part now, make sure you pull your weight, So now the uncle nephew relationship, even though it's there, it's always going to be there, man. I love them cats, love me, and I love them cats forever, man. You know what I'm saying? But now you're in a situation where, like I said, now Mike's head is exploding. When I've never had the experience, you exploding on me like that before, man. It's like, oh wow, ooh, please don't ever miss that note again. You know what I'm saying? And now every time that note comes up, it's like, oh shit, that's that note. Don't make Mike's head explode. You know? Yeah, it's that now. You know, when before, you know, like I can remember when I used to be a kid. Like I can remember when I used to be when I was about 7, 8, 9, when they were touring in the 80s, even though it was kind of sparse in the 80s, when they would tour, the couple of times that I would get to come ride with them on tour, Mike Hampton was somebody that I really took an interest to. He would be somebody that I would always follow around and just always be trying to talk. And he would always give me the time of day. You know what I mean? He would always be, you know, just like an uncle, you know, would do. Is always good advice and, you know, make sure you brush your teeth. You know, he's that kind of guy. You know what I mean? So it'd be all of that. And now you're on stage with him and you know, it's like, man, what the fuck are you playing? You know, that's some fucked up shit you playing. You
Get
know,
some pull punches.
yeah, I can't believe George. You know, a matter of fact, I can remember the first show that I showed up with my guitar, and I stepped up there and I walked up next to Mike, and he was getting set up, and I had to say to him, yeah, so I'm gonna be playing guitar now. And it was just like, you know, it's like now this, you know what I mean? And as far as the reaction from Mike, you know, it's like, oh, now, what kind of games are we playing now? You know what I'm saying? And it was just, like I said, boot camp from there. All of a sudden, it went from Uncle Mike and, you know, what's up, Neff? It went to, you know, now we're in a working relationship and you got to pull your weight, you know. And I've been pulling my weight forever, man. And you better ship up or shape out, buddy, or shape up or ship out. You know, with that, you know. And I respect it. You know, I respect it. I'm blessed, man.
You know, I caught you in the band in Charlotte a few months back.
Okay.
And you know, I know you took kind of the front center on One Nation and also on Absence of a Brain. When did you first get the spotlight like that in terms of the singing, and you know how was it kind of decided what you would do and what you do now?
Okay, so the One Nation thing was kind of how I worked my way back in. They came to DC, and that same show that I asked to come back out on the road, he actually at that time had my uncle Kevin on the road for a minute, and Kevin was doing some of those songs. So right before they went on, I pulled Kevin aside and I asked him, "Yep, K Star, that's my uncle Kevin Shider right there, y'all." I asked Kevin. I pulled him aside. I said, "Kevin, man, if y'all do One Nation, why don't you let me get it tonight, man, please." You know, and it's lo and behold, they played it, and he went and started it, and he looked to the wings to see if I was standing there, and I was, and he waved me on out. And I came out and I, you know, did my best Gary Shider that night. And, you know, at the time, you know, I can imagine how I probably actually sounded, you know, but at the time I was really, you know, I was just really getting some things off my chest anyway. You know what I mean? I really needed to do this. You know what I'm saying? This was my therapy for losing my father, man, because you know, as you can probably tell as this interview was going, man, you know, I was crushed when I lost my pops, man. I loved my father. I admired my father, you know.
I actually lost mine this year.
So, well, you understand what I'm saying, man. You know, it's a crushing fucking blow, man. And especially when your father's in the spotlight like my father was, you know, what like really started to really kind of thorn at me when he died was to be on Facebook and just to see everybody else so hurt. So hurt. You know what I mean? All the fans so hurt, man. And honestly, you know, I always knew I was gonna be hurt when I lost my father. I knew I loved him. Something that I honestly been trying to mentally prepare myself for, believe it or not, since I was about 13 years old. You know what I mean? And it's just something that you ain't gonna be able to prepare for, man. And it was like, man, watching everybody now posting these songs, and it's like I couldn't even, the songs and his soul, when he would go down to his soul or hit one of those screams, man, it just broke me down, man. And I just didn't think I didn't even think I would ever even be able to really listen to the music again. You know what I mean? So I needed all of this, man. I needed this shit. It was all the therapy I needed, man. And it brought me right to the place that I needed to be. You know what I'm saying? So yeah.
Well, we're all grateful for it. Glad you're continuing that legacy. I'm hoping that P-Funk is eternal.
Yeah.
I don't know how much longer George, I'm sure a lot of people, I was talking to Danny Petrosian, a lot of people ask the question, how long can he go on with George? And when he finally, hangs it up, what's going to happen? Do you have any thoughts about that?
I'm sorry. One more time. I'm sorry. I just got a text message. It was pretty serious. Will you ask me that one more time? I apologize.
I was just saying that, hoping that P-Funk is eternal, especially touring. And so have you given any thought to when George finally hangs it up, God bless him with how he's going. But one day, he's not going to be able to. So do you think the band will continue touring? What do you think will happen?
Well, this band is good. P-Funk is forever, man. So yeah, this band is gonna always tour, man. It's gonna always tour. He set it up for it to be that way. Look, that's why all these side acts are out here. You know what I mean? Because George understands that this is a platform that he's created. You know what I mean? He sets us all up on this platform to be able to do whatever it is that we want to do, even while he's here. You know what I mean? So when he leaves here, it's going to be business as usual, man. You know what I'm saying? We're going to always do this thing. We're going to always do this thing in his name, like he's standing there. You know what I'm saying? So, of course, it's eternal, man. He made it. He made it to be that way. That was I don't think he planned it that way, but that's what he's made this into, man. P-Funk is gonna be forever. I'm not gonna say for certain whether I know this band or what conglomerate of the band will do that. But what I do know is that the P-Funk family is so extended that whichever conglomerates decide to come together and do the thing, it's going to all still be one nation under groove regardless. You know what I mean? And George will be smiling down on it when that day comes. From wherever he will be, he will just be smiling down on it with his sinister Clinton grin, saying, "Look what I did." Y'all do your thing.
How would you describe your relationship with George, Garrett?
George is I'm not one who's necessarily, first off, I'm a quiet person. Never really been too social. You know what I mean? Or at least not very outgoing socially. You know what I mean? So now I'm also the kind of person, with that being said, who has not necessarily spent a lot of time around celebrities that weren't my dad. You know what I mean? Or my godfather, right? So with that being said, my dad was actually my dad and lived at home. You know what I mean? So I knew who he was, or at least I knew, that at least I knew dad, right? So now George, from the time that probably even my father has met him, has always been kind of a popular dude, a celebrity. You know what I mean? So with that being said, anytime that in all my life of knowing George, George has always had a lot of people around him, a lot of people wanting to get his attention, a lot of people who just always trying to get at him for something, for some reason or another, right? So with that, it always kind of felt like a barrier for me. You know what I mean? So I've never our relationship, we got to, not that we don't have a good relationship. We got a great relationship. You know what I'm saying? I see him as, what's up, G Dad over, it's that, you know what I mean? But even I have not always, or not really had a chance to actually sit down and, really dive into the man and figure out, how he works and how he thinks. And, you know, I don't, I've never had a chance to peel the layers off of George to see, what that really is. You know what I mean? From my own perspective, not to say that George is not, not to say that George is putting on a front or anything. It's just that, like I said, there's the celebrity layer that a celebrity always has, you know what I mean? And that layer has to always be kind of a guard. And, it's about getting, if you're fortunate enough to be able to get behind the guard, is usually when you get a chance to figure out who the real person is, right? So it's like I've never really had a chance to sit down with him and figure out those things. What makes him tick? What makes, I don't necessarily know those things. I just know that I've known you all my life, and what I mean. Sometimes we might rap on some, for a second, and shoot the shit. And most of the time you busy on your thing, and I might not be able to see enough of you, but to be like, "What's up? How's everything? All right, keep it moving." You know, we might, smoke a joint or whatever. You know what I mean? But even still, it's not a whole bunch of conversation because I'm not necessarily a conversational dude, and you know, and then I also kind of feel like somebody in his position, he's got enough on his plate than to be listening to me talk. So
it's kind of funny with George in a way because he's pretty easily approachable. He's always been that way.
And yes, he
but,
is.
But he's hard to get to know deeply, but he's easy to
like
get
that.
to
Like
know.
that's exactly what I mean. It's like if I get a moment and it's just me and him, then it's like, oh well, shit. Well, what do I say? You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, what do and you can't come up with anything better than what's up, man? How you doing? How's everything? Yeah, what you smoking on? Yeah, oh, okay, yeah, this one I'm smoking on. Oh, okay, okay. We killed the other night, didn't we? Yeah, 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 yeah. You don't necessarily know where to go from there, And
It
I
sounds
and
kind of like a player on a team with the coach, in a way.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And still, even after 40 years now of knowing him, I just still kind of just no, don't want to say the wrong thing. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's that. So yeah, but I love George to death, man. And like I said, our relationship, that's my godfather, man. He's my goddad. So he's just a very busy goddad I have, man. He's just a little bit too busy to, always be checking up on me. So I got to take the initiative to check up on him and make sure he's all right.
Cool. Hey, we talked about Mike and Blackbird already some, but I wanted to throw some other well-known names at you from the Funk Mob.
Okay.
Kind of get your quick reaction on, if, assuming you've met them and spent some time with them, but, something musically and something about their personality. So Bernie Worrell, what was your experience with him, if any?
Okay, so a lot of my main experiences with Bernie was more so as a kid. You know what I mean? Between like the ages of me being born and maybe like 5, because by the time the 80s really rolled around, he wasn't necessarily rolling with them anymore. He was doing Talking Heads, and he was Bernie. He was doing his own thing by then. Um, so my early experiences with him, he was just like all my other uncles, just this, goofy dude who smiled and seemed happy all the time, and who played keyboard, it was that simple for me as a kid for all of these cats. You know what I mean? Like, unbeknownst to me, are these like the greatest musicians in the world, some of them. You know, they all just cats who, my father and mother's friends who played music. And it just seemed that all my mother and father's friends just played music, but it was just a common thing that they had, you know. I didn't like see any of them necessarily on TV unless it was all the band together, to really put it together that, oh, these are celebrities, you know what I'm saying? Like it kind of took a minute for it to dawn on me like that, you know what I mean? So, so like I said, somebody like Bernie, my first experience is that's what it was. He's one of my unks who was, always happy, always smiling and goofy, and he was kind of a jokester sometimes, and he played the keyboard and he, was goofy at it. He used to always make these little goofy mannerisms. I thought as a kid, and I used to always think, oh, he's funny, you know. Yeah, so like I said, and then some of my later experiences when I was starting to kind of incorporate into the band the first time, he came back for a little while, but by then he was, a little more older, and he didn't necessarily he was a little older, so he couldn't necessarily, we had 3 buses then. I didn't ride on his bus, so I didn't necessarily see much of him. And then I got a chance to see him one time at his the when we did the Colbert thing. I got a chance to see him then, and that was the last time. And got a chance to hug him and exchange I love yous, and that was about it. you know. So that's the extent of my experiences really with Bernie. Oh, and I did forget this. Bernie, he did. Never mind. Never mind. I won't go there. I'll leave it. Okay. I ain't
We'll
gonna
talk
do
about that
that.
after. What about Bootsy? You spent any time with him?
No extensive time. I just kind of can recall him in the studio as a kid here and there. And when he come back to tour about the same time Bernie had come back for a little while, but by then, everybody was kind of like he was kind of touring his own, doing his own separate tour. They just all doing the same tour, but he had his own bus and his own band, and that's kind of what it was. So I've never really spent extensive time with Bootsy either, besides, bumping into each other. And it's like, oh, hey, sound check. How you doing? How's your mama? All right, good to see you. You know.
Future project,
Uh
maybe. What
let's
about Boogie?
Oh, now Boog, that's Unc right there. Now, him and my dad, they go back to kids in Plainfield. They knew each other before, they knew each other before they knew puberty and all of that. They went through all of that together. You know what I mean? So uh Boogie has always been in my life, you know what I mean? And the Boogie, another interesting cat, man. Jokester, funny guy, really deep guy. You know what I mean? I used to love I loved when his era of bass playing in the Parliament-Funkadelics. Um, I loved his era of it. He had a certain nuance about his playing where it was more so, he was really muted a lot. What I mean? And he made that a thing, what I'm saying? Trying to be kind of just quiet and in the mix. Whereas, most bass players are kind of the root, along with the drum. He's just kind of content to just kind of melodically just kind of, dance with everything and not necessarily stand out, which is kind of cool, what I mean? And kind of an all-time kind of thing that he used to preach to us, I remember. I remember he used to come out and stay with us every now and then, what I mean? And I'm still really cool with all of his kids, Chauncey and Tanya and, his wife, Donna, Lisa. I'm probably missing some. Mona, Remy, David. Yeah, I'm, still cool with all of them. So,
Another great one that we lost too soon and recently.
yeah.
What about Mudbone?
Mudbone, so Mudbone and my dad is, they kind of share kind of a special bond, the two of them. I guess kind of being like the main voices in their camps kind of thing, doing that. I guess that's the bond that brings them together, or that's a piece of their bond. But they always had a pretty deep bond. They always seemed to really dig working together. You know what I'm saying? I can really recall my dad and my mother when they would be working with Mudbone somewhere, they would always be pretty excited about it. And he's recently just come back and Mudbone, he's a serious cat, man. You know what I mean? He's serious about his work. He doesn't jive around, no BS, no nonsense. You know what I mean? Make sure that it's good, that it's perfect. You know what I
He's a
mean? And he,
pro.
yeah, and a pro, yeah, professional, man. He's a true professional. And another eccentric personality, man, as are most of these cats. Very eccentric. Worldly. Has been there, done that. A good cat to have around. You know what I mean? He's a good cat to have around.
Definitely one of the most unique voices I've heard.
Oh yeah.
What about Peanut?
Oh, Peanut, man. Peanut, man. Peanut was a pretty uh he was a pretty mercurial cat, man. You know what I'm saying? And did his thing the way he wanted to do it. He didn't give a damn about nobody's opinion of it. You know, he was gonna do it his way. And that was pretty admirable of him. Another very important cog in the Bootsy and the P-Funk dynasty as far as the background vocals go. Has contributed a lot to this. Um, yeah, but for the most part, that's what I could remember about Peanut, man. He's just pretty mercurial cat. He was quiet, stay to himself. He liked to play basketball. Pretty interesting fun fact about Peanut. He would, if there was a court anywhere around, he was gonna go. He was gonna be running some basketball.
Was he any good?
Yeah, he was pretty good. He was probably one of the best out of the band. Not that any of us are great, but so with that being said, he's probably one of the best. He definitely. I tell you what, he definitely didn't lack for effort. You know what I'm saying? He gave it his a full, he gave it the full go. You know what I'm saying? So